All right. Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome to Uncontrolled Opposition. I am your engineer and producer, Jayme CheeseSlice. And we have a good show for you today. We're going to talk about the Laurel Canyon music scene with Elizabeth Gould and Paul Fitzgerald. But first, I want to let you know if this is the first time you've ever watched our show here on YouTube, we are a radio show first and foremost, and we have to record it for WBAI. We also go on the Progressive Radio Network, and we have to record it anyway. So we decided to do our recording sessions live here on YouTube for people to watch and see, so you can see the process that goes into being made. And I try to interject as little as possible when they're actually doing the recording, so I don't have to cut all that stuff out. With that being said, let's go ahead and bring on Gloria. And Jeremy is not here today. So hello, Gloria.
Hey, Jayme. I'll talk about Jeremy in the monologue. So
Okay,
we'll cover him.
No problem. I'm sure the audience will get the lowdown on that as soon as we get started. And I'll go ahead and bring on our guests for today, Paul and Elizabeth. How are you guys doing today?
Okay,
we're good.
All right. So I'm going to hand it over to Gloria.
You guys try to squeeze in a little bit because we're also broadcasting. We're also broadcasting on Twitter, and so if you see the screen on the left, that's our Twitter feed. So there we go. Now we've got you see it. So yeah, you're gonna have to get really close.
I'm gonna have.
Well, I don't know. I've only known her for about 57
You have
years.
to move over.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Try.
Okay.
Yeah. The problem is I got to figure out how to shrink them now because they're taking up the whole screen, and I don't know.
All right, we'll work on that.
I'll work on that.
Okay.
We're going to switch to Gloria here. She's going to do the monologue, and then after that, she'll introduce you on the recording, and then you guys talk for the next 50 minutes. And at the end of that, I'll flash the card for let's get this all on the screen. I'll flash the card for the end of the recording. That'll be for my editing purposes, but we'll still be live on YouTube at that point, and then we'll wrap up the YouTube show after that. All right. So let's hand it over to Gloria and get this show started. Take it away.
They keep taking away my my blur filter.
Yeah,
it's annoying.
I don't know.
They're out to get me. I
don't know why that's happening. It's working for me. At least your room is clean. It's one of the cleanest.
Yeah, I know. I have to keep it clean. Okay. Hey everyone, welcome to Uncontrolled Opposition, where together we battle mind wars with truth strikes. I'm Gloria Guillo, an investigative journalist, and I'm usually here with my co-host, Professor Jeremy Kuzmarov. He's the managing editor of Covert Action magazine. Our producer and engineer is Jayme CheeseSlice. The opinions you hear are ours and that of our guests, not those of WBAI or the Pacifica Foundation. This content is intended for informational and educational purposes only and should not be interpreted as professional or legal advice. Listeners are encouraged to form their own opinions. Jeremy is with his family today, celebrating the life of his dad. His father passed away last year. We send our best wishes to Jeremy and his family. His mom, Donna, is a big fan of our show, so let's also give a shout out to Donna. Coincidentally, my dad died last year too. My father bragged about getting his boosters and flu shot right before he got deadly ill and died. How about that? Dear viewers and listeners, how many of your loved ones have passed away since 2021? Yes, they are trying to kill us. Useless eaters. And thin the herd. Yep, that's what the Epstein predator class call us. Now on to the show. Today we're confronting one of the most seductive and deceptive chapters in recent history, the engineered rebellion of the 1960s. I'm pleased to welcome back investigative journalists and musicians Liz Gould and Paul Fitzgerald. Their first-person accounts on intelligence influence over the 60s is really useful to our understanding. According to our guests, the Laurel Canyon and San Francisco music scenes felt like the raw, authentic heartbeat of the anti-war generation, a spontaneous burst of creativity and defiance that promised to sideline wars forever. However, Their research shows something far more calculated. Military intelligence and the CIA helped mold what looked like an organic uprising, redirecting youthful energy away from sustained political resistance. With the free love, drugs, and rock and roll music narrative, the social engineers led us by a brass ring. This time, not through our nose, but through our genitals. This playbook traces back to the masters of psychological manipulation, Edward Bernays, nephew of Sigmund Freud, and the father of modern propaganda and public relations. He taught governments and corporations how to engineer consent by targeting unconscious desires and wants instead of rational needs. Sex sells. His techniques turning citizens into predictable consumers and crowds into manageable herds became foundational. London's Tavistock Institute took these ideas further, developing sophisticated methods of mass psychology, social engineering, and cultural reprogramming that influenced everything from wartime propaganda to post-war societal shifts. Tavistock's framework for breaking down traditional values and personalities and reshaping behavior with media, arts, and induced crises align perfectly with intelligence goals. Fast forward to Project MK Ultra. In 1953, the CIA launched this sprawling mind control program, 149 subprojects and counting, dosing unwitting Americans with LSD, experimenting with hypnosis, sensory deprivation, and psychological and physical torture in prisons, clinics, and safe houses. The goal? Develop techniques to break and reprogram human minds. Many records were destroyed in 1973, but their surviving fragments reveal a nightmare of non-consensual human experimentation. And just recently, on June 30th, the House Oversight Committee's task force on the declassification of federal secrets, chaired by Representative Anna Paulina Luna, held a major hearing titled Mind Control and Accountability, Uncovering the Truth of the CIA's MK Ultra project. Witnesses included historian Stephen Kinzer and investigative journalist Tom O'Neill. They laid out the horrors and pressed the intelligence community on its ongoing unwillfulness to finally declassify files. A former CIA officer even testified that he doesn't believe the research ever truly stopped. Luna emphasized how destroyed documents have eroded public trust and demanded greater transparency, echoing exactly the kind of cultural and behavioral control operations that shaped the counterculture decades ago. Back to today's show. Our guest will explain how Laurel Canyon became the perfect Petri dish. Musicians flooded into this isolated enclave despite it lacking a music industry infrastructure. From there emerged the Byrds, the Mamas and the Papas, Frank Zappa's Mothers of Invention, Buffalo Springfield, and the Doors. What many don't know is that a striking number of key musicians had military intelligence family ties. Zappa's father specialized in chemical warfare at Edgewood Arsenal and MK Ultra hotspot. Jim Morrison, son of Admiral George Stephen Morrison, tied to the Tonkin Gulf fabrication, reinvented himself as the Lizard King, pushing sensory derangement drawn from Huxley's psychedelic ideas that fit perfectly with these social control experiments. David Crosby's father was a World War II military intelligence officer. Ray Manzarek, co-founder and keyboard player from The Doors, served in the Army's security agency. Scene figures like Vito Polenkas injected frenzy dancing, free love fashion, and a hedonistic vibe that defined the hippie movement. Brilliant misdirection that turned potential revolutionaries into participants in a spectacle of escape. This wasn't accidental. It aligned with the CIA's MK Ultra infiltration, which was designed to this wasn't accidental. It aligned with the CIA's MK Ultra infiltration, which was designed to undermine the anti-war movement by flooding the culture with psychedelics and breaking behavioral norms and family ties through excess. The same manipulative hand appears in other domains. In retrospect, it seems the rebellion many of us embraced was skillfully managed to neutralize its real potential. With fresh congressional scrutiny on MK Ultra now underway, it's clearer than ever how these techniques echo into today. Today's I can't say this. Sorry, Jayme. Today's divisive narrative that's forwarded by AI and social influencers is no contact. Every family member that disagrees or is critical is now summarily branded and banished as toxic in what's become a cancel culture that's openly hostile to even the concept of debate and self-reflection. What's left is that we are now all free to watch Netflix alone in our bedrooms. With endless porn on demand on every media device, we don't even need the sliver of human contact that comes with loveless sex. Thank you for both coming back on our show. How has this history continued to echo today, and what genuine awakening is required? Take it away.
Well,
Liz, you take it.
thank you so much, Gloria. That was a fantastic introduction to the whole, well, actually to the whole process. But I would like to add one additional event that I do think needs to be recognized as pivotal to everything that was happening, and that was the assassination of JFK in 1963, because we're looking at an inaugural event happening before that in Laurel Canyon, where this was beginning to be organized, the music scene that didn't exist, which is one of the reasons why it's so obvious when you look back on it, that there was something very special going on in who got there and how they ended up so popular. And one of the, for us, as we were obviously, boomers, we were part of the generation who was caught up in the whole issue of the assassination of JFK first, of course, but then the anti-war movement, which sort of took it over and took all our angst over the JFK assassination and put it into this war that we all believe wouldn't have happened if JFK had actually lived. So, we're looking at a process and we're looking back on it. I do want to make a very important point. While it was happening, we had no idea the level of we were in our, teens and 20s when all of these things were happening. Our families had no discussion or knowledge of this. It wasn't common knowledge, certainly in our neighborhoods or anything like that. So these revelations about what we'd experienced in the 60s, and basically this would go into 1970, because the real pivot for Paul and me was that when we got into the anti-war movement as college students at the time, which was spreading across the country, very, very active, fervent movement of which.
What year exactly was that?
This would have been probably around 64, 65, 66. The evolution, I'd say it really hit on 66 for me when I got into college, and the activity level, clearly advanced. And at the same time that this was happening, Paul, I didn't know Paul yet, so I'm just telling my side of the story. What really did happen, though, that brought us together was there was a phenomena that was growing at the same time, around 67, 68, and it was called the American rock musical Hair. And this was important because this phenomena really captured the entire anti-war movement. And it turned out that Paul auditioned, what's 1969? Was it December of 1969?
December of 1969.
Yeah. Okay, and he ended up getting the lead of the Boston show. So, and I ended up knowing people in the show, so we met. That's how we met. So for a whole year, we experienced the anti-war movement through this phenomena that, again, felt like it was natural, felt like it was spontaneous. It was filled with the most creative and absolutely talented, very young people. One of the things HARE did that was a really unique phenomena was they always hired local people, local singers. They didn't look for the ones who had all the credentials. They wanted naturals, and boy, did they have them in Paul's show, that was for sure. So that step off was something. And then you want to add your side of that now?
Well, it's interesting because I came at it from Boston was a very small place, okay, as opposed to New York City and LA and the whole scene. And so everybody knew everybody else here. And everybody kind of knew that in a left-handed sort of way that the entertainment market in Boston was kind of dominated by these old line families, and these old line families were kind of like mainline Philadelphia. Okay, they were all connected to. They had one person in the family who was a CIA guy, and they didn't really talk about it, but they all just knew it. All right, Bank of Boston. They called the Bank of Boston the Vault. If you wanted to get something done here, you went to the Vault, and the Vault was basically all the approved agenda for the city of Boston. So at any rate, so then you had this whole Irish versus old Yankee type thing happening in Boston. So I went in and auditioned when I was 13 years old for the Magic Flute. My parish priest, who ran the choir, sent me in. He called up one night and told my mother, he said, I think Paul should go in and audition for this thing. So I got introduced to this local academic / intelligence / musical / theater crowd when I was 13. So anyway, so I was kind of made aware of it, and it was the strangest thing. I mean, they handled the audition like for the Magic Flute, which was Sarah Caldwell and the Boston Opera Company. They handled it like an intelligence operation. I went into a hotel room, I sat down, I sang for I don't know, maybe 30 seconds and said, thank you very much. That was it. We went home, and my mother said, I guess that's it, huh? I said, yeah, so what, right? Sunday night at 8 o'clock, the phone rang, and they said the auditions, the rehearsals will begin on Tuesday at 3 o'clock at this hotel, such and such a hotel. So it was all very quiet, very out of whatever anyway, to begin with. So I kind of, all my teenage years, I did a lot of different things. I got to BU as a freshman in the fall of 1969. And so at the very last day of the first semester, I got called to my faculty advisor's apartment, not his office, to his apartment. And so he welcomes me at the apartment, and he sits me down, and he says, he says, I've been hearing from your teachers, your professors, that you have a lot of potential in certain ways. He said, have you ever considered working for your government? And I said, no, actually, I hadn't thought much about it. And so he said, well, what do you think about Vietnam? So I said, I don't think we're going to win it. So he said, well, that doesn't really matter. He said, the whole idea is, he says, you're not against America expressing itself in the world, are you? And I said, no, I don't think so. So at any rate, he said, well, I want you to think about going to work for your government. So I said, well, I went down to the Wilbur Theater today. I read in the Boston Globe this morning, they were holding open auditions for the Broadway show HARE. They're going to bring it to Boston. And so he said, oh, you don't want to have anything to do with that. That's just, that's frivolous. You're going to be doing some serious stuff. So I said, well, I can sing, and I know all the songs and everything. So anyway, so I go. It took me 10 days or 12 days, 2 weeks to get an audition. I did the audition. They said, don't cut your hair. They called by the time I got home. They said, you're exactly what we're looking for the part of Claude, the lead. So anyway, so I said, I'm a freshman at BU. I had just come off this personal experience with my faculty advisor. And so anyway, so I go in there, and I really am. I'm a square bolt on a round thread. I just, I'm different than these people. I've got a different perspective. I could have played sports at any of the colleges I went to. I could have done any of those things. And so anyway, so I sang the songs, and it was the introduction. I got introduced to this international movement of musical expression that was coming online, that had come online during the 60s. And so what happens is that we got directed. I don't know if anybody's seen the Rocky Horror Show picture. Okay, well,
yeah, I've seen it.
I
worked in a repertory theater, and matter of fact, I saw it more often than I would have liked.
I
It was
know.
on rotation.
We got Hair. They brought in a guy from Australia named Jim Sharman. Jim Sharman was the director of the Rocky Horror Show. Okay, the original on stage version, and then the picture. Okay, so anyway, so I'm singing my songs during rehearsal and everything, and he says to me, and I was singing them up against the female lead, and so he looks at the female lead, and he says, technically abominable, but emotionally wonderful. And then he listens to mine, and he says, Paul, technically perfect, but emotionally devoid.
Right.
Okay, so that was my introduction to this crowd. And so then we went from there. Hair was very successful in Boston. Peter Yarrow was part of was one of the opening night, and with his attendant producers and the people from New York. I don't know if you've seen the recent Bob Dylan movie. I'm kind of fascinated by, and it's really with Timothy Chalamet, where he plays Dylan. They have that kind of influence from those people. Those people were still very much. They're very a crowd of people. Yes, Liz.
Well, it's Peter Yarrow's father.
Well, yes, I'm getting to that. Yeah. So anyway, so this group of people were very influential in promoting Bob Dylan. They saw him as a light for the future. And so, but turns out that what I didn't know at the time was that Peter Yarrow and the whole movement was really reflecting an intelligence perspective. Peter Yarrow's father had been the first, he'd thought up Voice of America, I guess, and was the first leader of Voice of America, which was kind of like the U.S. propaganda arm in Europe, preaching against organized socialism, of the Soviet Union, of the Soviet kind. And so it was not what it is today. When the Soviet Union collapsed, of course, it was a total shock to the loyal following, on the one hand. On the other hand, it wasn't surprising. I mean, we kind of stayed loosely connected to the group and Hair. And interestingly enough, I got a call after Hair to go down to New York and audition for Jesus Christ Superstar. Now, Jesus Christ Superstar was the British invasion, and the Australians came in, okay? That was when the Five Eyes started coordinating the entertainment industry. And that was Peter Brown was basically representing the Stigwood organization. Stigwood was from Australia, and he had a closet full of people that he supported. He had supported not the Doors. He had supported Cream. He was very, very connected to the highest level. And Peter Brown had been Brian Epstein's assistant. So when Brian Epstein committed suicide, Peter Brown kind of took over the Beatles, and he took over what was left of the organization. So he was moving that whole agenda forward. And he was a lawyer. And so at any rate, so that was another layer of it. So I was getting data. Basically, I'm very political. I was very analytical. I didn't have to go into the music business. I had other options that I could have taken. And so here I'm looking at this situation and going, what am I dealing with here? What is this? And so you could see other people who would audition for these things. It always struck me as really odd. And I talked to other people in the business about this. Why someone with incredible talent would not get picked. He'd get or she'd get isolated. They'd say, no, we're not choosing them. And so you'd ask them and they'd say, why didn't you pick them? And they say, well, they're too good. or they're to this, or they're to that, whatever. They'd always have an excuse for it. And so, after a while, you begin to see the patterns of with the pattern recognition. You begin to see that, some people it's being guided by an invisible hand. And when you start connecting the invisible hand to one place or another, where is it going? You begin to see what's behind the scenes. And that's, there are a number of books that were put out about it about a decade ago, about the connections in Laurel Canyon. And how Laurel Canyon suddenly magically became the place where all of this counterculture flocked, and they were all very successful, and they all wrote songs for each other, and they all sang them. And then, of course, you learn later on that the songs really hadn't been written by them, or not entirely by them anyway.
Or sung or performed by them.
Or even performed by them, that it was really what this thing called the Wrecking Crew was.
Wow, I'd like to know more about that, too. Give us some more on that too when you're finished. Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to make the point though about a connection that we made between the hair experience, which clearly was very important because that went on for years. So we have a lot of data now that we can look back on it. But one of the things that came out of the Laurel Canyon was someone by the name of it was called Vito and the Freaks. This was a man who was organizing all these wild dancers to basically come out and produce excitement whenever there was a performer that was coming out of Laurel Canyon. And these at the times when these people were not known. So this was all part of it. Well, it turned out that this guy actually created what we would now look at as the hippie movement. They literally became the sort of the traditional concept of the living style, the free love, living together, all the drugs and all of that. And so you can begin to see, and then of course you look at what was hair. Hair was all about that lifestyle. That was the whole production. So you can see that even though in the case of hair it was a worldwide production, it went all over the world. But the inspiration for the basic structures of all of these things seemed to come out of Laurel Canyon, and certainly San Francisco too. There was a relationship between both. But and there was also a huge amount of Canadian performers. Joni Mitchell was certainly one of the better known ones. Stephen Stills, and who was the
Crosby, Stills,
right?
Young.
But Neil Young, he was the one. Neil
Young
was the Canadian. But again, in looking at
the band that backed backed Bob Dylan.
The band.
Yeah, I mean, I think 3 out of 4 of them were Canadian.
Right,
so.
right. And again, it's interesting. We're not saying that just because it came from Canada means that there was some kind of a conspiracy.
Now, Gloria, don't tell me you're Canadian.
Okay. I'm a hardcore New Yorker. But one thing I do want to say is, as a kid, okay, and this is between the ages of, I guess, 4th grade and 6th grade, my school put on the play Hair with students from the school. So I saw Hair as a kid I must have been either in 4th, 5th, or 6th grade.
Oh, wow.
So they were really rolling that out. They wanted everybody indoctrinated into that concept. And I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I thought the songs were great.
Yes.
I thought, the music was phenomenal. It was a wonderful thing. But we were, being definitely programmed.
Well, it's interesting. You see, I think that's where it gets kind of difficult, I think, to really draw a line between something that really works beautifully and we loved it. And the music scene in that era is still, we still play the music from that era. But I have to admit, now when I listen to it, I also wonder what never was released, what never was created because of all the people that got the top slots and how much help they had in doing all their musical events. They were not truly these super talented people all on their own who did this. They didn't really come up the real hard chain of dragging their own talent and having to get it through. And so that really disappoints me, even though I love the music and I think it's fantastic and what you just said about Hair. But when I look at the messaging and what was missing. That's when I realized the subtlety of how this takeover, really impacted us in ways that we simply can't even calculate to this day. We absolutely don't know. The one thing that I do feel, and I like to make this point because as a boomer, I've been confronted by some people who have a very bad impression of boomers because we were viewed as this drug-crazed, peace-loving, and we destroyed America basically. And it's part of the reason that our generation got it okay, and our kids now can't buy houses. So you've got this crisis between the generations. And I really like to make the point, even though I know the manipulation was there, I also know that what we felt we were doing and our belief in it was real. And I don't think any of us should ever forget that. That doesn't change that it was misused and that we didn't understand what was being done to us. So that's my lecture.
Well, the fact is that we also had in Boston at the time, we had a radio station called WBCN, which they made a documentary about it. And it's really kind of interesting because it kind of fizzles out, the documentary fizzles out at the end because the whole movement just kind of it transformed. It was so exciting in 1967, 68. You had these enormous marches that were going on. And it was formed by a guy who'd come in here he was going to do he had a grant from the Ford Foundation or the Rockefeller Foundation.
It should have been a warning.
Yeah, to set up some kind of art thing in Boston, and that fell through at the last minute. So he said to himself, he was a businessman, he was a New York businessman. And so he says, well, what am I going to do? So anyway, so he came up with this idea of all of these students in the city of Boston and all the protests were going on to set up a radio station. So he goes and he basically buys this old classical station that has no supporters at all. It's got no money. It's run by an old family from Boston or something and from the North Shore. And so he goes and does it. And he goes over to the local radio stations at the colleges and he brings in all these guys and women, young women, to give them a shot and everything else. So it fits the feminist agenda. It fits the whole CIA agenda. It fits the whole kind of counterculture thing that they were creating. And it's like a freewheeling, open, whatever. And so it was open and freewheeling for 3 or 4 years, of course, and then it fizzles out because it was intended to fizzle out. It wasn't intended to be anything serious. So because of the creators. But at any rate, and that's what promoted the music. It was the first FM radio station in Boston that played rock and roll, and you can listen at the time. It was an inspiration. I'm 17 years old, I'm 18 years old, and here you've got WBCN playing the entire version of In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida, and you've got them playing the entire version of a Cream song that went on for 15 minutes, or the Doors' lengthy, anything, Light My Fire that goes on and on and on and on, and Jim Morrison's explorations and poetry and all this stuff. And it's kind of like, wow, this is the world that we need. This is the creative, functioning world that we really need. So as I said, and here I'm an athlete at the same time. So I'm getting that world simultaneously. So I get to be you. And they're going, gee, we can find a place for you in this whole process. So, and the hair thing was mine. That was completely mine. And then of course I meet Liz within a few months of being in the show, and they're flying me back and forth to New York, and that was what was so interesting was the connection was instant and it was very high level. The people that I was being auditioned by in New York were working for the Marion Doherty agency, which was like the premier agency at the time. And the woman who wound up spinning off from Marion Doherty became Woody Allen's casting director. So, it's kind of like all these people were there. And it was a very small group of people. And, you had your New York crowd, and then you had your Boston crowd. And, it was kind of like they were very selective in terms of, the Boston Opera, not the Boston Opera Company, the Boston, not the Pops, the Boston Symphony was actually brought on. It was hired by the CIA to do a tour of Europe back in the 1950s. And it was basically as a propaganda tool. So it got kind of like it went hand in hand. that whatever was coming out of the Boston intellectual artistic scene was being promoted on behalf of the interests of the United States.
Well, this actually does actually go back to 1953 with the release of the Cultural Cold War by the CIA. So again, in looking at the long-range planning that really set up the cultural, the Cultural Cold War in 1953, that turned into the peace, love, Torah movement of our generation. These are all interconnected events. And it had to do with the total infiltration of the entire public school system, right straight through, your PhDs, okay? Everything was drawn into this. And that's where you really got the creation of what would be called, the American idea of the left. And of course, the American idea of the left really revolved around Trotskyists, who were basically okay. And there, of course, today, many people know that Trotskyists were what many of the original neocons were before they turned into American war mongers and basically invited in to produce,
people have asked the question.
Two concepts that I was really taken with, as a kid. I was about, I guess, 12 or 13. And there was a lot of drugs. I grew up in the burbs in Long Island, and everyone was smoking weed by really 12 and 13. It wasn't unusual. Yeah. And taking drugs, I guess 14 and things like that. It was really, they were all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And two concepts that I recall focusing on that, I look back and it's kind of funny, is this concept of free, being free. What is free? Freedom. Okay, they took a concept of freedom and they just twisted it to it actually had no meaning. So I recall I was about 13 years old, and we used to write on our blue jeans. And our blue jeans always had holes in them. And the more holes you had in your blue jeans, the better off you were. And we would write on them. So I wrote the word free. And some older kid came over to me and said, is that a price tag? You're free? Okay, that sounds good.
That's great.
At that point, I was a kid. I said, what does free mean? What is this? And, it was kind of an awakening at that age that some of the terminology I was buying, had absolutely no meaning. And then the other thing is the concept of peace. This is not world peace. This means don't fight back. Don't object to anything. Peace, shut up and make a peace sign. Don't confront anyone. Don't do anything. So it was not really like world peace or peace with our government. It was resign and accept. That's the peace you can have. So I think it's very important that these terms really are explored. And also, thank you.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I think you can thank Leo Chern for that. I don't know if you know who Leo Chern was, but Leo Chern was instrumental in creating helping to create the NAACP, and he was the man who created Freedom House. And so the idea of using that, he was also in business.
Freedom House is a good
Freedom
example.
House, but he was also, interestingly enough, in business of producing a business periodical with, of all people, William Casey, future CIA director William Casey. And basically the two of them put out in 1940, I believe it was, they put out from Chern's business, how to turn the United States into the arsenal of democracy.
Arsenal, right?
The arsenal of democracy. So he was the kind of creator. Well, I'm sure he didn't create it, but he's probably stole it from somebody. But the idea.
I just want to interject one thing. He was also a member of the Knights of Malta, and all the CIA directors and all the people in positions of government, key industries, media, things like that, are also Knights of Malta. It's very connected to the Vatican. Yeah. So there's a real, you might want to say a conspiracy theory, but it's real. No, they all get together. It's their own private party.
He also introduced Marilyn Monroe to JFK.
Well, anyway.
So, in terms of the circles he traveled in. So the fact is that, I mean, he's considered a gadfly, okay? But he's a very interesting gadfly in the sense that he also was the head of the President's Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board, and he advised Vice President Bush. When Bush was the head of the CIA, he advised him to accept the findings of this thing called Team B, which of course was the neocon Trotskyist analysis of what the Soviets were, quote, really doing with their weapons of mass destruction, not what they what their capabilities were, but what their intentions were. So it was all psychologized. So Leo Chern was kind of like in there from the very beginning, and freedom was his major word. Okay?
I did want to make a quick point to what you said earlier about your personal experience with the concept of freedom. I long ago realized that when it's free, watch out. That can, they used to give away cigarettes. There were all, and by the way, the whole drug movement during the 60s was all about free drugs showing up that were all being manufactured by the people directly, getting it from the CIA, getting financed at least from the CIA. So you have a clear agenda to get these drugs into these kids' hands. And when you talk about peace, meaning, shut up, well, there's no better way to shut them up than to have them high on some drugs. And then and those drugs, though, remember, those drugs specifically neutralize your idea of wanting to have any kind of self-defense. Even it's not just fighting outside of yourself. You don't even want to defend yourself.
Neutralize your ego.
That's how powerful they are, especially when they're given in this completely unregulated way.
See, Gloria, I grew up. My father was a pharmacist, and he had his own drugstore in Cambridge between Kendall Square and Harvard Square. So I saw we'd get the phone calls at 2:00 in the morning of the people who were breaking into his drugstore to get the drugs, right? So I kind of had a bad attitude about people who took drugs from the very beginning, okay, as a child. But my brother became one too. So I also heard all the stories about all the new drugs that were coming up. And my father had worked for McKesson, the drug company, and before he opened his own drugstore, and then got drafted right before the Normandy invasion because they needed pharmacists. So he disappeared for 2 years into Europe, and when he came back, he didn't want to be a drug salesman anymore. So I kind of got indoctrinated very early on about this whole thing, and I kind of saw it from a different perspective, as a business perspective, that what was really going on, that a lifestyle was being pushed. It wasn't happening by accident. Mm-hmm. And so needless to say, when I got into hair, it became an issue because I, was not advocating, dropping acid and going for trips. I was still buying plane tickets at that point. So, but, so anyway, so it just gave me a different perspective on the world. And so I started, unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know, it kind of, brick by brick, I kind of built this alternate understanding of the universe I was living in, because I was getting these opportunities to go and, somebody who ran a department at a university in Boston would ask me if I'd like to come in. He said, I don't know what you're going to do, but I think you would be a boon to our staff, to our curriculum. And I thought to myself, I don't think they'd want me for very long, because the first thing I'd do is start picking them apart and, finding what they were really all about and digging deeper into the background. So bit by bit, I kind of isolated myself, and Liz and I started, when I wound up looking for a job in TV, and when I was done with the theater thing, and the rest of it, I decided that I would take those abilities and use them in television, and then came to realize the people who were doing television had been doing it since they were on the television track since they were in high school. They had been interns at television stations, and then they'd kind of jockeyed for positions, and that it was very political, and that it was very up in the air in terms of the major network TV stations and the network affiliates. So basically, I had been in a political campaign as a member of my family who was in politics, and so I had helped him to get elected. And so anyway, so I said, look, I gotta get a job in TV. So anyway, so he says, well, here's somebody I met once. So I called them up, and they said, oh, there's a station locally that's looking for an anchor for their news and for a show they're doing. So it turned out it was the Christian Broadcasting Corporation. Okay, it was Pat Robertson's operation. I knew nothing about it. I was not a born-again Christian. I was looking for a job in the business, right? I had a lot of political skill and a lot of political ambition. So I called up the person. I came in, and they said, how'd you like to host a talk show? And I went, gee, that's interesting. I think that would be perfect. So I said to Liz at the time, and we had just gotten married, I said, I've got my own show on this TV network. And so anyway, what brought me into further, once again, these events, kind of drag you into its reality. So they were running a documentary called The Salt Syndrome, which had been produced by something called the American Security Council, which was this extreme right-wing 1950s McCarthyite organization that hated everything and anything that came out of anything west of German, the Danube, let's put it that way. So east of the Danube, rather. So anyway, so I wound up going to the management and saying, we really can't be running this 4 times a day and call it public affairs. I said, you've really got to answer that. So bit by bit, I said, and so here I am. I'm taking my experience in hair, and I'm taking Jesus Christ Superstar, and I'm putting it now into Christian broadcasting, okay, on the air. I'm not a Christian broadcaster. I am their assigned, essentially non-preferential broadcaster, and saying, you got to do this. So they said, okay, fine, make a documentary about the arms race or something. So anyway, so I used my political connections, and I called up some people, and I got John Galbraith at Harvard, and I got Paul Warnke at the State Department, who was, who had negotiated the agreement with the Soviets and SALT II, and a bunch of other people, and who were had been in the Manhattan Project. So anyway, so all of a sudden we're in the middle of this whole thing, and then about how, in meeting Russians and how they don't want war, they want to continue with detente, they want everything else, and then they go and the Soviets invade Afghanistan, same time period. So it's like, wait a minute, none of this makes sense. There's another agenda going on here. What's the agenda? So it turns out that the agenda is the fact that Zbigniew Brzezinski, behind the scenes, had got in with President Carter. Actually, it was Rockefeller brought in Brzezinski brought in Carter brought in Brzezinski, and so it was this little family relationship there. And so at any rate, so they were basically, doing whatever Brzezinski recommended as the national security advisor. So I'm still seeing this influence now on the music business of where this goes. And the seed was planted in the 60s. You've got a whole generation of kids another generation now that are being impacted by the Laurel Canyon experience. And it's being held up as a kind of mecca. But now, whereas the people who
have another point to add, when I was going to junior high and high school, everyone played guitar, myself included, and pretty badly in those days. But not much better these days either, but I can get by. But the songs that everyone was singing were the, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young songs, the Neil Young songs, the Joni Mitchell songs. I mean, we had all of that. And that was just all over the place, no matter where you looked. It was, that music scene was really all over. It was, just all over.
Yeah, and it wasn't an accident. I think that is the point. And how much of that is going on, has continued to go on. I wonder, is there anyone at super popularity who hasn't been put on that track by the system? I'm convinced that nobody gets past a certain point if you're not basically approved. That's it.
And then one thing too, I just want to say is even lyrics that you thought were good weren't. They were all basically to sit down and shut up. I mean, even a song, I forgot which group. I think the Animals. I'd love to change the world, but I don't know what to do, so I'll leave it up to you. I mean, something that you think would be a good song or an anti-war song, they really weren't. They always had some kind of twist, which brought you back to don't do anything, sit down.
I think you're right.
I mean, even you're right. Joni Mitchell, I loved Joni Mitchell back then, and I mean, some of her later albums, she even has a song in which she said, "Oh, we have this idea about peace and love, but it was just an idea. It really didn't really matter. We were young. We didn't really know what we were talking about. It was that kind of thing.
Throwing it on.
Just dismissing the whole genre at the time. So I'm sure your guitar playing is excellent. And I'll tell you what, I'm sure it's better than mine.
My ex-husband did the lead guitar work, and I don't know if you heard the opening song. That was one I wrote, and I sing on it. And my ex-husband, who watches the show, hey Ben, is the amazing guitarist and does all that fancy stuff. I did the chords and the rhythm guitar, which doesn't require much, thank God.
Well, it still requires more than I have. So at any rate, it was just, it was a wonderful, let me put it this way, it was like a magical mystery tour. It really was. And I could sing. One of the reasons I think that the Peter Brown crowd liked me, because the Beatles were like coming to an end, and I had learned to sing rock and roll. I sounded a lot like Paul McCartney, and I could kind of imitate John Lennon, and so there was a lot of the stuff they were trying to turn all the Beatles material into stuff that was going to be into stage plays in New York, and then have all these people who'd been in Hair and Superstar come and perform in them. So that was kind of like they were trying to create a new industry of rock opera. And so
one other thing interesting, I just want to throw it out to you guys, is I was thinking about the rock musicals in general, and and because you brought up also Rocky Horror Picture Show, and the Rocky Horror Picture Show is about a tranny. Okay, these are concepts that are always kind of breaking the relationship between men and women, the relationship between children and parents. And then I also think a band I loved, growing up, which was The Who. And I realized Tommy is about the molestation of a child. And I mean, and that was something that was played, and I think in my maybe 6th or 7th grade music class. So here we are listening to Tommy. We didn't really put it together in our heads that this is about some uncle or something molesting, the nephew. Right. But I mean, all of these topics, were really very strange.
Well, even the song, Led Zeppelin song, we've noticed this because we play it a lot. That's the way it ought to be. And he's singing about, Robert Plant singing about the boy next door, and then he's singing about the girl next door.
He switches.
In a public performance, it's the girl next door, and on the album, it's the boy next door. So there's always this kind of, I mean, when you're, women sing songs about, about men and, taking the male role or whatever it was, and men sing songs that written by women that take the female role, that sort of thing. That you didn't think about that when you sang a song, because it was the context in which it had been written, or where you're singing it from. But when you actually take all of these things piece by piece and you look at them back and you trace them back to where they were coming from and what they were all about, you can realize there was a pattern in it. And it, once again, this whole Laurel Canyon thing stems from this thing called PSB 33-2, which was the CIA. You can get it in the CIA reading room. And it's the Psychological Strategy Board. PSB is Psychological Strategy Board, 1953. There was going to be a doctrinal answer to what was going on behind the Iron Curtain, because they were having after World War II, the Soviet Union was not viewed the way it was viewed by the McCarthy's committee. It was viewed very favorably in Europe, and certainly by students in Europe. And so as a result of that, someone at the CIA had the great idea to come up with an idea that, well, we got to create something. So let's do this whole kind of American way of doing things and the freedom that you have if you embrace it. And so that's where Jackson Pollock come in. They supported guys
throwing
like,
paint on a wall.
Jackson throwing paint on a wall. That's artistic expression. You have to reinterpret reality the way we want it reinterpreted. In other words, that anything goes.
Yeah.
So if we propose it, then you have to learn to accept that is just a new way of doing things.
Well, just a correction. Everything doesn't go. Only things that they don't care. Then you're free to do things that have absolutely no import or have no importance.
Right, you're right. But we were trying to make the point that's what they're projecting. Anything goes. And what you find out are the ones who are going to get put on the New York Times bestseller list may not sell the most books, but they're going to be put up there because they're saying the right thing. And those are the books that are going to be made into films and all of the rest of it. So it's a very, very, very specific channel that you get shoved into. And there's no question that there is no freedom. In fact, that's an analysis of one of the government officials what was his quote about it was the most totalitarian document he had ever seen, this idea of freedom.
Well, on my pants leg, okay, because I didn't want to throw the pants out, I changed free to freedom.
Wise move.
Yeah.
It still meant nothing. It still meant nothing. But at least I wasn't humiliated by the older kids.
Unintentionally humiliated.
Well, now you can look back at it and realize that you were part of a propaganda war.
Yes. Well, you observed some very interesting little tidbits that I now absolutely know you were totally right. This is definitely the way that the system was, infiltrating through the school system and through the entire country for sure.
Yeah, but as I said, in the Boston area, we had a very small, it was a very small experiment. New York was kind of like anything and everything there, okay? But in Boston, it was like everybody knew everybody else and who was doing what. And, the arts scene and the music scene was very, very controlled. It was very academic. The old families had their place in it, in Beacon Hill and Back Bay. And it's like, you'd be invited to the concerts in these people's salon, on a Sunday afternoon. And, that sort of thing is, and, then you'd realize that they were the head of the insurance, some big insurance company or whatever. But it was all small time compared to New York.
Or the old Brahmin money.
Well, we got the hook from Jayme. We've hit the 12 mark. So I'm going to have to just, ask you please to let our audience know how we can follow your work.
Oh, okay. Well,
it went so fast. It went so fast.
God, yeah. You're right.
This is like just hanging out. I loved it. Thank you.
Lovely.
It's good to have you guys back. Oh yeah, please.
We have 2 parts to our memoir. And you can get a lot of different kind of information. One's called The Valediction, 3 Nights of Desmond, The Valediction Resurrection. We also do a lot of writing. That's on our website, valediction.net. We've kept up with a lot of new research that we've been adding, and we are working on the 3rd book. So we hope to get it all put, the whole.
And Valediction, by the way, just so you know, 3 Nights of Desmond was originally a screenplay that we wrote for Oliver Stone. It was an idea back in 1993, actually, 1993, 94, when we were under contract.
Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's, we decided that I had written this, I had constructed an idea for conveying the complexity of the Afghanistan story. And so that's what Desmond is. My family comes from a place called Desmond. So.
Well, the opinions you hear are ours and that of our guests, not those of WBAI or the Pacifica Foundation. That wraps up our show for today. This is Uncontrolled Opposition. I'm Gloria Guillo. Remember to like and share our broadcast. Your kind support keeps us going. Please find us on Substack, Twitter X, and Podbeam. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you next week. If
Well,
you,
Thank
I
you,
think
Gloria. That was great. That was
one
fun.
thing I know in the
wait.
past-
If you hold on, if you have any extra thoughts, you could say them now. And if there's any space, Jayme will take them and shove them into the broadcast.
No, it was literally that I'm used to you give a 10-minute flag. So I definitely lost track of time.
Me too.
Oh yeah,
Me too. It was
I
great.
stopped flashing on the screen. Maybe I should start doing it again. I thought it was distracting. So
Oh,
yeah.
Well, I was used to
we
it.
got lost in the conversation.
No, it was a good conversation. It was very, very interesting.
Yeah,
And
we
then,
got
I
used
think it'll
to
play well on the radio too. So
Good,
that's
good.
what's most important.
It's lively. It's lively.
It's hard not to meander to all kinds of different realms.
Well,
when
you know,
you
we've
go
been
back.
at this now since 1970. So there's a lot of stuff there, and then you start talking about it. All of a sudden, you go, "Oh, yeah, wait a minute. There's another side of this story." You know what I mean?
Oh,
so,
yeah.
So you get lost again. You get lost in your own rabbit hole.
The other word that they really overplay is democracy. So our dear audience, anytime you hear the word freedom or democracy, think of the CIA and you're being manipulated.
Well, the same thing applies to the term communist. Okay, you get these regimes got labeled communists. Okay, well, we talked to so many people in Afghanistan about what the so-called communist government was, and then we talked to the people in the Soviet Union about what the communist government was. The Soviets never considered the Afghan regime to be communist because they couldn't get their act together in terms of what it was they actually were. And so that's when you get this guy that went in there like Hafizullah Amin, who'd been educated in the United States. He got his bachelor's here in the United States, and then he got a master's in here.
He was there at Columbia at the same time Zbigniew Brzezinski was at Columbia. Ha ha ha.
Yeah. So I mean, in terms of his education, he supposedly became a communist at the University of Wisconsin. Some summer outing that he took for 2 weeks or something like that. So so you could never even come up with, talk about democracy, what communism actually was, because you couldn't get two communists in the same room and have them define it the same way.
Yeah, but that propaganda was based on clearly godless communism. That was the key. No matter what they were godless communists. And of course, this was all part
I mean, that was one of the benefits of working at the Christian Broadcasting Company for 3 years, is the fact that you didn't have to worry about what a definition of communism was. It was like, it was just them evil, very simple.
I don't know. I have this thing that I made up when, I would rather explain to Republicans what isn't communism or what isn't socialism than explain to Democrats what is a penis. I mean, with the Democrats, I mean, they were just saying that like the male penis is not a penis because the person who has it identifies as a female. So even if you have a penis, you're really a female if you think you are. I found all of that just way over my head.
I know.
Well, it shows you that the idea of reality literally is when we speak together, we think we are understanding each other, and then we discover what you just said about a term that you think has a definition, and you discover that there is a totally different definition based on the upbringing, based on the orientation, based on so many factors. And I think that's a huge problem for people. Our goal to get people to come together to try to create an idea that can actually take over this insanity. I mean, take over what's taking over, take it over with something positive that we want. We can't come together because of this.
My mother was a very astute person, and she was very suspicious, and she was very, to the point of paranoia about stuff. But she did not get the idea of metaphor. And I used to speak instinctively, metaphorically about things. And I would talk to her, and I'd say something, and she would take the attitude that I meant it, literally as opposed to metaphorically. And so I had this constant back and forth with my mother growing up.
So you knew how difficult.
I knew how difficult getting somebody to understand a point of view was without knowing what they referred to it as, So it wasn't really until I got into university that she began to appreciate the fact that I didn't speak the same language she did, and the terms that she gave that she used to give to things were not what she thought they were.
Yeah.
So anyway, we learned at our parents' attitudes, and we spend the rest of our lives processing it.
Well,
I was going to say, you brought up how they talk about communism. Well, if you watch Fox News now, the way they talk about socialism, like every Democrat's like a raging socialist. And it's like these people don't know what it is, or they do know what it is and they're just lying. And it's so irritating to listen to the ignorance that's being spewed.
Yes,
on like one of these major
it's also
news
hard to
networks.
take socialists seriously when they're all funded by Soros. So these terms are just ridiculous. I mean, it's either you support, the working class and the impoverished, or you don't. And either something helps us, or it doesn't. And that's really it. It doesn't matter what label, it doesn't matter what ism you put on it, because you could be oppressed under any ism. It's anytime someone, also just to put that out there, anytime someone says to you, okay, well, you're going to suffer now, but it'll be good later.
That's the Catholic Church.
Yeah, exactly. That's when you start saying, well, wait, I think I'm being hoodwinked here. And really the Communist parties have said the same thing. Oh, you have to give up, you have to do this and do that, just so everyone uses this. It'll come later. Just wait.
I want to mention one thing, though. This is where the economics of Henry George comes in. Henry George was an economist in the late 19th century who had a book out that was so popular, it was like number 2 to the Bible. All right. His ideas spread around the world. Okay. His ideas were so dangerous to the ruling elite, being able to maintain a total control, which they wanted to. Rockefeller created the University of Chicago School to create neoliberalism, to basically undo Henry George's economics, which was, again, it was so popular in this country. When he mysteriously died, he was running for the mayor of New York, all right, 1897. And he ended up the second time, the first time they know they cheated him out of it. The second time he ended up having a heart attack and dying. If he had actually become the mayor of New York and turned that city into a land value tax city, we'd be living in a different world right now. That one thing. It's still alive. In fact, actually, an interesting little historical fact. Honey Fitz, JFK's grandfather, as mayor of Boston, was a land value tax advocate. So it was that popular across the whole country. So here we have a homegrown idea, American. It doesn't require giving up any of the things that Americans...
It makes capitalism work better.
It makes capitalism work more fairly. It actually can completely turn around the crisis in the high cost of housing. And it's a very practical solution that really works. It's actually been tried. Pennsylvania has a lot of towns that have turned into a land value tax.
They used to in Pittsburgh, didn't they?
Well, that was one of them, but many of them had done, because the state allows it. It depends on the state whether it's allowed or not. Sometimes you have to try to get it into the state, and get it ruled on. But they had I think when the steel mills went down in Pittsburgh, they ended up, the whole place was crashed economically. They lost everything. And so they turned to the land value tax. And it literally brought back Pittsburgh so totally that it became one of the best places to live. And there are other towns in Pennsylvania with the same exact phenomena, where what it does is it restrains land speculation. And land speculation is the problem with affordable housing. That's why when filthy rich people buy up all the land and do nothing with it until all the investment from every other area, of the community, through the federal government or the state government or the local government, improved the area with roads and, obviously all kinds of services, that land value goes up. And when that land value goes up, the person who's done nothing benefits. Well, if you tax that land correctly in the first place, it actually suppresses the ability to take such advantage. And that's one of the biggest immediate benefits. But it's hard to get it through because Rockefeller really set the economic agenda back in the, in the creation of the School of Economics out of the University of Chicago.
I just sent Jayme a photo by email. Can you post it?
Yeah, I'll take a look for it.
Okay. Yeah, it's hopefully you can find the photo quickly. All right, we're waiting on that. Come on, Jayme. You got it? I'll keep talking. He wants to keep talking. He did the role. You have to keep.
The whole reason I wanted to say that was when you brought up working class. The working class movement was the target all along, but it wasn't the 20th century when after the Soviet revolution. That was just a continuation of the targeting. It was the 19th century where the working class were really rising through the Georgist economics and coming together. So, so this is a good example where if you only limit it to the Soviet revolution and all that, and then you get trapped in, evil communism, godless communism, Georgism has nothing to do with that. And in fact, one of the great, industrialists apparently is quoted as saying, oh, they had nothing to fear from Lenin and from Marx. They had plenty to fear from Henry George.
I don't know. It doesn't seem to have gone to you, Jayme, has it? You got it? Okay, wait.
Yeah, I just got it.
Okay, yeah. I just want to post this.
Bring it up.
I just really want to post this photo just so you can take a look at it.
Yes.
Okay, so for those of you who are listening, it says it's from Alexander Soros, and it's a photo with him and Mamdani, Mayor Mamdani, with their arms around each other. And it's on November 4th, 2025. And it says, so proud to be a New Yorker. The American dream continues. So, basically, these socialists, okay?
Quote unquote.
Well,
yeah. I mean, I have my doubts.
You're right. No, absolutely right, Gloria, that the corruption is there. But I think what we have to do is allow for the possibility that things are changing. People do have very, major changes in their own lives. Things can happen. So even though you don't expect it, you allow for the possibility someone can surprise you with something at any time. I'm not expecting anything personally from any of these socialists because they're now being pretty much attacked as evil. I mean, we've got I heard one of these people, criticizing the socialists who are taking over the Democratic Party, that though they push that universal health care. These people are against universal health care. We're talking about some sickos here.
Well, the other thing is, the universal health care means, everyone's mandated to get a COVID shot.
Well, I
mean, we really need to get away from our sick care system
yes,
to really a health care system. So that it needs a good overhaul. We got to get rid of this patent medicine that was shoved down our throats by Rockefeller so that he could sell more mineral products, which were basically the mineral products were, the garbage from the, refineries. They didn't know what to do with it. So they fed it to us and told us to put it on our skin.
He shut down homeopathy.
Yeah.
Exactly. So he didn't just shut down the classic economics and the Henry George. He shut down every major system. Absolutely. So we know everything has been corrupted to some degree. But I think the basic idea that whatever healthcare exists, okay, that these costs obviously, I mean, right now, people are literally, they're dying. If they have any health care that they need, they can't afford it.
And if they take the health care, they're dying because the hospitals, want to use these technologies that just, aren't good. But anyway, let's wrap the show. And it was wonderful to have you guys, and we'll hope to have you back soon. And thanks, Jayme, for holding down the fort. And again, to Jeremy and his family, we send you our best thoughts to you at this time of remembrance.
Oh yeah, definitely.
See you guys
And
next week.
It's 4th of July this weekend, so 250th anniversary. Woohoo!
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something 10 years ago I would have been really excited about, but I don't feel that excitement anymore. It's sad.
Right.
But
Well-
it is 250.
Well, look at it. It's still our country technically. So
Yeah, I know, but it
can really make
like
it.
less and less and less
We
every
can
day.
make the dream. We had, as long as the dream is ours and not an AI dream that comes in and replaces our own.
Be clear.
Yeah.
Be clear about what
Yeah.
you want and don't give up.
Yeah.
Don't ever give up.
And
Believe
don't
it.
underestimate your own ability to make that change. And
I
that
mean-
there's a reason why the people who are behind AI want it to rule us, is because we're too difficult to control, and we're doing things
But
they
it
don't
moves so much
necessarily
faster
want us
than
to
we
do.
do.
But
And it's like you can't keep up with what AI does. It's just it feels daunting. It's
It is.
almost like you want that big solar flare to hit the earth and wipe out all the electronics, because that's the only way we can take care of it all.
Yeah.
And that'll free us from our digital masters. So it's a terrifying situation. All right. Well, let's go ahead and wrap up. I want to thank Craig Pasta Jardula. He's the executive producer of Uncontrolled Opposition. And we're going to get out of here, and everybody have a good holiday weekend. So thanks for watching.
Thank you very
We'll
much.
be back next week with another episode, and Jeremy will be back with us. And that'll do it for the day. Bye-bye, everybody.
bye-bye.